Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Alexander Chee, the moderator. I started this morning in P-Town for the Provincetown Book Festival, and now I'm here because I'm just a maniac for book festivals, I guess. Just running around, moderating the hell out of everything. So I have been trying to think about how to connect these three very different books, these three very different novels, beyond what we think family is. But I think that maybe is the connection in a strange way, which is like, what do we mean to each other and how? But I thought I would begin by asking each of you to respond to this question, which is, how much do you think your own family patterns came out in the writing of these novels? I'll start with you, Jason.
Thanks. Thank you. I've always heard novelists talk about how they don't like to discuss autobiographical details in their novels, and I'm like, my family were very shady Jews, and that's what this book is kind of about. And also my mom's name, her maiden name was Kaplan, so I didn't really veil too much there. And also, I mean, with my own family, because I'm a first generation American and Holocaust survivor family and all kinds of weird mishigas, as the French say. We don't really talk much, and so nobody wanted to ever tell me anything about our family or our history, whether it was good, bad, or the gray area. And so that definitely factored into it in like a very I don't want to say Freudian way, but I was definitely trying to work some stuff out. So this book is very much me and my family and my story.
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, I feel like one of the things I've learned about writing is that no matter how hard you try, your biography does end up in the book in one way or another, and maybe it's in a way that only you can see, but it's still very much there. And I mean, my novel, I suppose, broadly speaking, is about the long process by which children must necessarily become strangers to their own parents, in a way, kind of. And I think that's probably something I've been thinking about a lot. I have two children. It's a book that I would not have been able to write or be very interested in writing, I don't think, if I did not have children. But it's only been lately, as I've been talking to people about the book, that I've also realized that it's a book I thought of as a book about parenting, but it's actually also very much a book about being parented. And so in that sense, I think a lot of the constructs of family that I observed in my childhood, and then that I probably both unwittingly and very consciously have replicated or tried to move away from in my own family now, appear in the book in different ways.
I'm going to try to talk while I'm processing the great things that the two of you just said. For me, the origin story of When the Harvest Comes is like deeply, deeply personal and sort of autobiographical. I started it the second year of my MFA, the summer between my 2 years of my MFA program. And my father, who was a minister, had died sort of very suddenly at the very beginning of my studies. And for me, I went through this sort of personal crisis of trying to figure out why I didn't care about any of the fiction that I was writing. And none of it had meaning for me. I would write these stories, I would get lovely feedback on them. I would edit them as much as I felt I needed to get the grade, and then I would move on to a new story. Nothing stuck with me, and I was like, this is not sustainable if I have a goal of becoming a published author. I need to write something that requires more work, more effort from me. And I found that I discovered this idea that was, I don't know, somewhere deep within me that was really tied to that. It was really tied to trying to process my grief, trying to process what I felt maybe had been revealed by myself, revealed about me, about my family. And I began to understand what some of those patterns are in my family, things that didn't feel like they matched sort of the brand of who we were. And so I was really interested in the writing of this novel in dealing with, things like naming the aspects of ourselves and naming the aspects of our families that my family struggled to talk about, that my family struggled to name. So some of those connections were very clear and very sort of on the surface for me. But I do find that in the process of talking about the book and in the process of like going on book tour and being in conversation, I'm always discovering new layers of that, things that weren't things I wasn't aware of as I was writing it that keep sort of bubbling up in conversations.
That's always so unnerving. Right, where you think, well, I've thought about this a great deal for many years, and here I am still learning about it on the road in front of other people. Always exciting to be a writer. It occurs to me that I should have each of you give a short description of your book and also say the title. Do you have copies with you to flash the crowd? No.
We were just talking about this back there.
Oh no, we failed the marketing part. Okay. Jason, you want
to? My novel is called Kaplan's Plot, and the easiest way to put it is it takes place over two timelines, and it shows a man named Yitzhak Kaplan coming over from Odessa in the early 20th century, and the things he has to do to survive, which, spoiler alert, it's crime. And on the other half of that, we see his daughter Eve and his grandson Elijah, and Eve is close to death, and Elijah has come back to Chicago, kind of with his tail between his legs. To his whole life has fallen apart, and he's back in his hometown trying to be with his dying mother, which it's a very fun time. But I swear it's funny. But he just kind of starts to realize there's so much he doesn't know about not just his family, but his mother, his father, and he starts to ask questions and starts to. It's little things that kind of come up and down that get him to start asking these questions, but it also helps that his mother is smoking a lot of medical marijuana, so she's a little bit more goofy and willing to open up. So that kind of, helps the process a little bit. But yeah, it's to me, it's a book about generational trauma, because I think it's something that we all, it doesn't matter what your background is, if you're Jewish, if you're Chinese, if you're black, if you're Mexican, anybody, Irish, it doesn't matter. Your family came to America or was brought to America, and deep in your being, you have some little nugget of the distress and horror that they went through, and it carries over into the generations. And so I wanted a way to explore that, and I've just always liked gangster stories, and just felt right. So yeah.
My novel is called Audition, and it opens with a woman who's very much in the middle of her life. She is an actress, she's happily married, and a stranger comes to her and tells her that he is her son, or that he thinks that he is her son. And from that premise, kind of two different realities unfold in the book. And the starting point for the novel, which I can pinpoint quite precisely, was a headline I read that said, a stranger told me he was my son. And I didn't read the article, but I had a real sense that there was a premise or that there was kind of something in that sentence.
A perfect prompt.
Yeah, it was exactly that. That there was a novel in there for me, but I couldn't quite figure out my way in, you know, when you kind of can smell that there's a world, but you don't know how to open the door to step into it. And I was with a friend maybe 2 years after that, 3 years. I wrote a different book in between, and I was with a friend, and I was explaining how I was preoccupied with a sentence, but I didn't know how to make a book of it. And she said, "What's the sentence again?" And I read it out, and she said, "That's just parenthood. Every time my son comes home from college, it's like a stranger has walked into the apartment." And so at that moment, I kind of saw the book I wanted to write, which would be a book about certain irreconcilable differences, things in very aspects of very universal experiences like parenting, like being a child, like making art maybe, that nonetheless have elements that are incommensurable, that cannot be reconciled. And the book has a very particular structure, and part of what I wanted to do was to write that kind of fissure directly into the book rather than simply writing about it. So that's...
I feel like I've forgotten the elevator pitch that I carried for so many years, but my novel is called When the Harvest Comes, and it begins on the wedding weekend for a gay interracial couple. Their names are Davis and Everett. Davis is mid-20s, black, very effeminate, very sort of small physically, and Everett is white. He's in his late 30s. He is very masculine, and he comes from a family that's reminiscent of the Kennedys. And they are like incandescently, irrevocably in love. And over the course of their wedding day, Davis and his sister Olivia get the news that their father has been caught in a tragic car accident. And what the novel really deals with are the repercussions of that situation. Davis was estranged from his father, and so it brings up all kinds of questions. He's re-examining his past, he's re-examining his family, he's re-examining how those elements helped him define who he is, and it all begins to threaten the foundation of this like beautiful marriage that he's created for himself and this family that he's really excited and sort of desperately optimistic about joining. And they have to find their way back to each other.
Can I just say, sorry, writers having to do the elevator pitch thing is so tough because it's like we have to condense it, but we just want to, and you guys both did such a wonderful job, but it is, I'm like sweating when I'm trying to do that. Yeah. I'm like, it's a duh, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh no, you had to do that. This is why you're getting paid the big bucks.
It's also because there were no books to wave around.
Yes.
So in some ways, just kidding. But so, Jason, with your book, there was something that I kept thinking of when I was reading it, which is how you don't really meet somebody until they're dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wondered. So you're nodding with some recognition. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I've been telling people that this book it's a ghost story, because I truly feel like I'm haunted by the people I didn't know. I'm haunted by the people I do know who are still alive in many ways, but I really genuinely feel, you know, especially because some of my family died in horrible ways, and I don't know anything about them, and I'm never going to. There's something about that is just incredibly tragic, and I think that's a real human experience. Like, so many of us have that experience where we maybe know up to our grandparents or our great-grandparents, and you know, you just kind of keep thinking, like, who was I? You know, or where do I come from? You know, because in America we have this real obsession with saying, well, I'm this and that. My family's this and that. And, you know, if we're born in America, we're born in America. But there is the past that we can't really have any real understanding of. And that's constantly on my mind. And I think that past really has done wonders to dictate my own past and present and possibly future.
And Katie, with your book, there's a moment that has stayed with me that I found so captivating, where the narrator and the young man who's told her he's her son, they're having their first encounter, and she realizes that he's doing a gesture that she has actually trained herself out of doing in her own acting because it had become like a tic of some kind. And I wondered how you came up with that particular moment, because it is one of those, families are such an interesting, like what we consider to be, what we pass on, what we don't. She starts to think about how he might have come across it, how he might have imitated it. Is he a con artist? Anyway, would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question, Alex. I think fundamentally when I started writing it, I thought of that moment as a kind of moment of the uncanny, of a moment of something that seems very familiar, something that is part of her repertoire of gestures and her way of being, that pops up in the wrong place. But then, of course, as you pointed out, it is really tied to two other things. One is the idea of legacy or inheritance or trace, I suppose, and the way in which we are linked to people who are in our family. But then also, I've actually just lost track of what the other thing is. Oh, I know. I think so many novels are structured around moments of recognition and moments of misrecognition. And I think, particularly in this novel, much of her relationship to this young man initially is one of a refusal of recognition, and then it's a kind of recognition and then misrecognition. So there are ways in which that moment of seeing a person and seeming to understand who they are and how they fit in your life, is constantly shifting in the book. And so I just wanted to take a little physical gesture and to embed it in their relationship from the very start. But I think it was, the novel opens with a restaurant scene where the woman and the young man are together, and as a reader, you don't know the nature of their relationship, and he is much, much younger than her, and they're surrounded by people who are interpreting what's happening to them in many different ways. Some of them think it's a love affair, some of them think it's something untoward, and that in part is because the book is very interested in the reader's interpretation of what's happening between the characters and in the idea of active interpretation in the reading process. But I think that gesture, that's a moment when she is called upon to actively interpret what's happening and who the young man is.
I guess I kind of want to know how you came. Like, how did you come up with it?
The gesture?
Yeah.
Oh, I went.
Because it's one of those.
It's quite
anyway.
specific. I have quite a few friends who are actors, and I went to see a play. I went to see a play with a friend who is an actor, and we were watching. It was a production of Master Builder, and she was telling me what she thought of the performances during the intermission, and she said, "Oh, well, I know that she doesn't exactly know what is happening in the scene or can't figure out her way out of the scene because she's reverting to a specific tic. She runs her hands through her hair every time. She's not actually sure that things are working in the scene." And it was one of those moments where once I saw it in the subsequent acts in the play, I just saw it every single time, and I could see this actress kind of doing that nervously. And so the idea of a tic that is deployed out of nervousness, that is deployed to make meaning out of a moment that maybe doesn't have meaning. A lot of the book is very much wrapped up in that. They're characters who are trying to make meaning, build a relationship, say they're mother and son, or maybe they're not mother and son, but they're constantly creating narrative, and maybe there's actually no narrative there. So.
Thank you. Denne, there's, I guess is it a spoiler to say this is a kind of trans coming of age novel also?
I don't think so. But I have been shocked at the number of readers who have let me know that they didn't see it coming.
On Goodreads?
And in person, both.
And in person.
I try to avoid Goodreads.
I mean, it's so interesting because I think of, with queerness, I think of the body as a kind of oracle, but I wonder if that stays true here. But there is a sense of like the main character having to confront several irrevocable truths about themselves. This is just one of them, but I'm not going to ask how did you come up with that, because I kind of feel like I know. But it is still something to choose to write about it, especially when it's so personal. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's, this novel.
And how that affects family. Right.
Yes. Well, this novel took me 14 years to write. It was about 10 and a half before I finished a full, complete draft of it, and then we sold it, and it was about 2 or 2.5 maybe between selling and publication. And part of it is that I don't write in order, and things just come to me, and I try to get them on the page, and then I try to make sense of them later. And so part of it is that there are things that happen towards the end of the story that came to me very early, and I knew that I was working towards those moments, but I didn't quite know what they would be or what they would represent. And it was really interesting because in 2021, I'd sent about 150 pages to my agent, and he suggested that we actually try to sell the book on a partial, and he'd been waiting for many years for me to write this book. And we did go out to some publishers and had a great response. In fact, got an offer, and I said, no, thank you, I'll wait to finish the book. But in that process...
Wait. You said no, thank you?
Yes.
I'll wait to finish this book?
Yes.
I like that. I respect that.
And it worked out beautifully.
All right, which family member brought that out in you?
My mother. My mother. 100% my mother.
All right.
But in that process, I was chatting with one of my really close friends, and I had not yet written the end of the book, but I was saying to her, I think I would want a reader, if a reader finished this book and encountered this character in the world 5 years down the line, I think I would want that reader to know that this character is trans. And when I said that, I said, oh, all right, I know what I have to do. If that's what I want a reader to know, why don't I put it in the book? And it changed.
Oh, so it wasn't a first calculation.
It was not a first calculation.
Okay.
And all of the other things that are at play in the book, including this marriage, this relationship, and how it works itself out, that's what I was really primarily concerned with for the first decade of work on this book. But once I did that, it precipitated a lot of things in my own life, including the decision to disclose my own identity, which at that point I had not done. And that, it was interesting. In my family, it opened up a lot of wonderful things. Their response was very different to what their response was when I was in high school, and I told them that I was gay, that I was a gay boy. Part of which reflects the times and the cultural conversations that we're having and their place in the culture.
They were more accepting of you as trans than gay?
Yeah, which shocked me completely. I had
we're not led to believe that that's how that goes, but that's so interesting.
Yeah. I think, almost 20 years had passed, The conversation was just different, and some of the ways that they think about things have changed. My family's very religious, and that is still the case, but some of the ways they think about things had just really evolved. And they told me in no small part to me and my sort of choice to kind of just be who I was and not be concerned with any of it. And that was really interesting because that was what I wanted, how I wanted the narrative to operate within the families within the book. I wanted for these characters to become who they are by the end of the book. I wanted that to sort of break open the chasm of these families. And of course, one of the families is quite small and there's not a lot of living people left. And then Everett's family is quite large and boisterous. And, I think they're still working towards that. But some of that was very much inspired by my lived experience with my own family. Does that answer the question?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure.
I mean, sure. I feel satisfied. I hope you guys do too. So now I'm going to ask you all to reflect a little bit about the lineages of your different books, of these different books, which is to say, kind of any books that you feel like helped you think about this book. Jason, you were talking about crime fiction with yours. Are there any literary godfathers or godmothers?
No, no. I actually did not want, I joked because of the elevator pitch thing. I joked. I'd be like, it's like The Godfather 2, but Jewish. But then I'm like, this is really going to satisfy a lot of 65-year-old white dads, and that's it. So not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm going to be one of those in a few years. But, I think back to, the chapter that's the most important to me is where you see the world for the first time through the eyes of a grandmother. And her name is Rose, and there's a whole backstory there. But she was the first person when I first started working on the book that I actually wrote 50 pages of it from her point of view. And I just put it away because I'm like, no, this is not how it's supposed to work. But I kind of felt so attached to her that I'm like, I got to do something with her. And I couldn't figure out how to do it. And for some reason, there was this Grace Paley story that just kind of kept sticking in my head because she's just my favorite short story writer of all time. And I got into an argument on the street, which is a very New York thing. 2 weeks ago, some girl was
very Grace Paley thing.
Yeah,
actually,
right,
also,
right. Yeah, I have a lot of those moments. But she had a Grace Paley tote bag, and I said, she's the greatest short story writer in American history. And her friend goes, I beg to differ. And I would go, you keep doing that. And I just kept walking. But, it was like her, Colson Whitehead's work is very important to me. Just the way he kind of could take any little piece of American history and or an unknown part of American history and just turn it into this big, grand, sweeping thing. That was, he's a big hero of mine. White Teeth by Zadie Smith. Chabon's novels obviously have a big one. And, honestly, it's not fiction, but when I was getting ready to finish the draft that I was like, okay, this is the one, everything started happening with the Israeli invasion into Gaza, and suddenly I had to start thinking to myself about all the trauma that's being inflicted. And that is, I was like, I hope this doesn't last as long as I think it's going to last. But so I kept reading about that obsessively every day. I still do. And, now it's so fresh and it's so horrific and daily that I'm thinking to myself, any of these people who survive, and it obviously coming from family that survived the Holocaust, it's very affecting to see it. But when you see pictures of children who are starving, not to get too too bleak, but it sort of kind of freshens it in your mind as you're writing this, and you're like, these are the things we're doomed to repeat as not just like one culture or one country or one religion. It's the things that we keep doing to ourselves as humans. And that reminder made me go, I don't think this book is ready, because I would like, this is a book about Jewish characters, but to me, it's about Americans and immigrants, or immigrants becoming Americans. And I just was like, I need to make sure that this could resonate with anybody. And I feel like I'm doing a service to anybody who comes from trauma, even if they've experienced it or not directly. Sorry, it's a lot bigger of an answer, but it's, I should have just stuck with Grace Paley.
I think she would appreciate that answer.
No, she definitely would have appreciated that.
Katie.
It's interesting to hear Jason talking about genre, because I'm also very interested in genre in my fiction, and I think for each of my last 3 books I've had a genre in mind. One was a kind of disappearance or a murder mystery, one was a courtroom drama, and for this most recent book it's horror is really the genre that I'm primarily was riffing on. And so the novel that probably most directly influenced it was Rosemary's Baby, which is a novel about troubled parenthood, and is also about New York real estate, which is 2 key things in my novel, I would say. And then I think a lot of actually films for this particular novel. So David Lynch was a huge reference point for me, in particular Lost Highway, which I think is a masterpiece, even though it's much maligned. And of course Mulholland Drive. Vertigo was another big influence on the book. The Servant by Joseph Losey, the script of which was written by Harold Pinter. And then a Thai filmmaker I love called Apichatpong Veerasatakul, who often executes a kind of cut in the middle of his films, in particular in 2 films, Tropical Malady and Blissfully Yours. And there is something about the formal audacity of his work, which is married with a very, in a way, quiet tone. So it's audacious, but there's nothing particularly show-offy about it. That became a kind of, I think Lodestar is overstating it, but it became something that I thought, oh, I would like to be able to do that one day. So that's my lineage.
So, a big part of the lineage of this book, particularly in my intentions from the beginning of writing it, is, and every Black writer says this, is Toni Morrison. But I also can claim Ohio, because I'm from Ohio, as she is, which I'm very proud of, even though it's a complicated place. But anyway, I was thinking a lot in the in the very beginning of the process, so way back in like 2011. I was thinking a lot about what she'd said about what motivated the writing of The Bluest Eye, and part of that was writing the story that you want and need to read. And also, she talked about wanting to write about the character, the person that she felt was like sort of the least protected, the most maligned, and that was like the young Black girl. And I felt like that idea could really apply to Black queer boys, particularly those that are more demonstrative in their queerness or more effeminate. And so, from the very beginning, I really wanted to, I should also say, I don't think this is a spoiler, that a big part of the manifestation of the conflict between Davis and Everett has to do with sex. And so I'm necessarily writing about desire, I'm writing about lust. And my feeling was that I wanted to kind of turn some of the traditional narratives about Blackness and desire, particularly in gay male spaces, on their heads in this novel. And so, Toni Morrison affects everything on a craft level. I'm always thinking about her, but also just in terms of the intentions. But The Bluest Eye was very important to me. Elizabeth Strout is one of my favorite authors, as Alex has heard me say many times, and all of her work is really important to me, but in particular, Olive Kitteridge was really influential in the early stages of this book. you know, I had a few years early on where I was really struggling to write sentences that interested me. I really was. I just was sort of writing what
Sorry,
happened.
I'm just as a writing teacher, that is a hilarious thing to hear. And also as one of your teachers.
Well, yes. This was before you came along in my
Yes,
process, though,
yes.
but I'm going to talk about that because that's important. Your role is very important here. But I came across the novel Ghana Must Go by the writer Taye Selassie, and I started reading it, and immediately I was like, oh, she was really influenced by Arundhati Roy. And then I, like, two paragraphs in, and then I went and found an interview where she said that, and I was like, yes, I'm a good reader, I'm right. But it kind of
Gold
stopped.
star.
Gold. Listen, overachieving student. I want the gold star. But it stopped me in my tracks, and I was like, oh, right. It reminded me what language could do, and the fact that, like, at the core of my love of writing, I love playing with words and sentences and paragraphs. It brings me great joy, and that I needed to insert that back into my process if I was going to finish this book, if I was going to have the wherewithal to, like, write a novel that was worth anyone's time to read. I had to give myself the tools to get through the process, and that joy was a big part of it. And so I, like, tossed everything and completely started rewriting the novel, like, completely from scratch. And that was in 2014. You know, in terms of the sex writing, I also want to I want to talk about James Salter and the novel Light Years, which was hugely, hugely influential to my approach to writing bodies and intimacy, and bringing fullness to the characters in moments of intimacy, and also thinking about the choreography of those scenes and physically what's happening and what exactly I need and want the reader to know, and where it can maybe be more porous. So that was really important to me. And then for many years, I didn't know how the novel was going to end. And again, this is before I was thinking much about the character's identity, and even fully about my own identity in some ways. And one of my great mentors, Angela Flournoy, who taught me at the Cambilio fiction workshop in 2015, said to me that if I ever had the chance to study with Alexander Chee, that I should do it. And I had wanted to study with him.
She was my student
Yes.
at Iowa, so this gets very...
Like, it's...
I know, it's like you're my grandchild.
It's very, yeah. I'm part of the lineage. But she was like, do it. And I said, I've been dying to, I want to. And he was teaching at Tin House the next summer in the novel writing workshop, and I had also told myself I was not paying for any more writerly education. If I was going to go somewhere, I had to have it paid for. And so I applied for the fellowship and ended up getting it, and I got to study with Alexander Chee. And in our sessions, one thing that you talked about that really clarified things for me was just the reminder that as queer people, and thinking about queer readers and the community, our lives are not only trauma. And there was going to be trauma at the heart of this story, but that's not the only thing that we need to be putting on the page. And that was really, really important for me to hear, because it made me be like, okay, I know the direction that I want to move in for the trajectory of this novel and where it needs to go. So you're a big part of the lineage.
I feel like there could be a poster just of
6
Cheese
degrees
kids.
of-
Yeah, just you at the top and just like 1,000 writers or more at this point.
Thank you. So I guess a last question here before we go to, are we doing questions from the audience? Okay. What is something that you feel like you learned about family in the writing that you didn't know?
I can definitely take this. First of all, I want to reiterate, my family is shady as hell. But no, okay, she's not here anymore, good. My daughter was born, I sold the book 2 weeks before my daughter and first child and only child was born. And I think because my own relationship with my parents has always just been so not great, I think I maybe took a little of that out in the parent-child relationship in the book. And and obviously, I don't have a ton of experience here, but when my daughter was born, I keep telling people, I'm like, I've done every kind of psychedelic, and it was like doing all of them and finally having the veil lifted and ego melting and all that stuff. It just changed me dramatically. And as I was like sitting up with her at like 3 in the morning or 6 in the morning, whatever, I'd be thinking a little bit, be watching her, but I'd also be thinking like, I have really misunderstood something here in my novel. And when I get the edits back, I'm not going to change a lot. My editor didn't change a lot, which I was really grateful for, but I do think I need to kind of soften this relationship because all of a sudden I'm thinking like the mother more. And, I'm trying to be in it minute by minute, hour by hour, not trying to think, 10 years ahead, even though I've been cornering Michael and Emma to give her a job at Books Are Magic. And literally just saw him outside and said that. But I really started rethinking things. And so when I went and did the edits, I'm like, I asked my agent, I'm like, can I please, it's not going to change the plot. It's not going to change. But I think there's something I missed here because I understand how hard this is. And I have a lot of empathy in general for people, but I'd never been able to fully put myself in a parent's shoes, a mother's shoes. Especially, I watched my wife for 9 months, and going through all of that and going through this beautiful journey that I'm on as a father, it just made me rethink everything. And I'm happy with how it came out. I'm really glad I got to do that.
Jason, that's such a beautiful and incredibly precise description of early parenthood, of that first year or so. I think when I started writing the book, I was interested in the mutability of families, and that's kind of embedded in the structure of the book, which has 3 characters, and they kind of change familial roles and familial structures over the course of the book. And that was something that I had experienced, within my own family, and certainly in my relationship with parenting, as I would see how the nature, the relationship with my children could change very, very rapidly, as well as the nature of my relationship with my partner. I think over the course of writing the book, though, what really struck me was the degree to which family is an institution, and the way that so much of what we understand more broadly in society originates in the family. Patriarchy begins in the family in some fundamental way, and a lot of the book is playing with these different roles, these different, I would almost say stereotypes, but these different tropes of ways of being that are actually quite fixed. And so against the mutability that I thought I was very interested in writing about family, I think I kept running up against the sense that the characters themselves were very aware of the boundaries of the parts they were being told to play within the family. And so in a way, the book is about the tension between those two things.
I think that's so fascinating because I feel like in terms of the process of writing my book, I kind of took the opposite lesson. On a craft level, we're always thinking about characters and how we want characters to be full and complete. And to my thinking, there's sort of an endless well as to what a character can be thinking and saying and doing, and the reasons why they might be engaging in those activities or behaviors. And I think, I feel like what I took away from the process of writing this book is that however big that is, family is like that times 1,000. Yeah. There's so much there. And for me, what that meant is that there's so much room for surprise and for families and people to go against the way that we've cast them in our brains. And my characters kind of think through that and realize that as they're moving through the novel, both as it pertains to their families and themselves. I'll say their selves. And so for me, it was that mutability that got really exciting, the bigness. And I began to realize that as I was working through this in the novel, I was seeing this again in my own family and families around me. And that was really interesting and really powerful.
Well, thank you. Now we'll take a couple of questions from the audience, if you'd like.
It's very intimidating.
Yeah,
mic.
I love,
Just casually stroll down here and
or sachet.
oh,
Thank you.
Hi. I hate my family. Do you think there's a way to write about families that are happy? And what would that even look like? And I guess I'm also asking, do you think there's a way for families to be happy?
So can I just? I wouldn't say I hate my family, but I'm not a big fan of them.
Also, I just want to say quickly, that's Anton Her.
I know, I was going to say the
Author
same.
and translator. Anyway, go ahead.
No, yeah, I also feel strongly about my family, and yes, I agree with that. But I also know that I've built my own family. My friends are my family. Alex, you are literally like family to me. I am not one of your students, but I look at my friends and people I've known for years and years, and they make me happy. So I think there could be something there. Biological family, maybe not so much, but your chosen family, the people that you decide that, hey, I love you unconditionally. Just saying that makes me want to kind of weep a little bit. It's a beautiful thing, so I do believe there is room for it, but it depends, I guess, if I'm going out of bounds on the way you're looking at family.
Okay, so I love my family.
They sound great.
They are fantastic, and they're brilliant, and they're talented, and I'm the baby, so I'm spoiled by all of them, so maybe that's part of it, but they are fantastic. They're not perfect, there are problems, and some of them drive me crazy, but they are amazing. But I don't know, I was very interested in writing about, there's really two families at the center of my novel, and then there's a third family, I guess, that's being created, being formed. And so I wanted to write about a family that had a lot of tensions, a lot of secrets, there was a lot of estrangement, and I wanted to write about another family that was big and boisterous and loving and demonstrative with their affections. And what has been fun and interesting is that readers, including Roxane Gay, were like, that family's the problem. and it's true. And so I think that one of the things on a craft level is that the full range of families, you can really dive into that and write something that's compelling and interesting and dramatic, regardless of the dynamics of the family. Even in a family where everyone loves each other, we have I love my family, and I do curse out people in my family in my head on an almost daily basis. But also we're obsessed with each other. So all the things.
All the things.
I mean, I don't have too much to add, except that I think happiness is really hard to write about. It's something that I don't know how to write about at all.
That's actually that's a perfect answer.
It's ineffable. It's difficult to source. It's difficult to locate. It's difficult to analyze. I mean, I think the great novelists are able to write about happiness, but I don't know how to write about happiness within the family or in general. But I feel like you do, which is wonderful. But but it's thank you. It's so amazing that you're here. I'm very, very thrilled. Yeah. I already said earlier this week, I accosted Anton and said I was a huge fan, but I'm now going to do it again and say I'm a huge fan of his work.
Come on up.
Hello. My name's Emily. I was just wondering, I write mostly nonfiction. I know you guys are fiction writers, but I think the question pertains still, even if we're not writing directly about our families, like if you're writing fiction, oftentimes your characters might be inspired, or a plot line might be inspired by a story from your family or from your past. And I think something that I run into a lot is questions and ethical concerns about like how, if my family is appearing in my work, or if I'm basing characters are inspired by somebody in my family, like how, as someone from within the family, right, like you know that person through a certain lens, how do you really balance that person as like someone who is directly related to you or inspired by somebody who's directly related to you, and then also as a person on their own, like a whole complete person that has had a life that has only intersected with part of yours? Like, do you ever find yourself like really puzzling over the ethics of how to portray people who are based on people that you know?
I think that's what it, anyway. Sure.
My first book was a memoir. I didn't want it to be a memoir, but I was very green, and the editor was like, I want the whole story. And I'm like, my family's terrible. They're gonna love this because, you know, they're obsessed with themselves. But so I think I got to get a lot of that out of the way,
Yeah.
personally. But that's not, everyone doesn't have that I don't want to say luck, but not everyone gets to do that. But for this, the story was so real. This is the most personal thing I've ever written, and this is coming from someone who wrote a memoir, because everything was so real and so deep and stuff that I've been internalizing for so long. And I also got to take not just the bad of people in my life and people that I have only heard stories of from my family, but I got to take all the good too. And I just turned it into composites. Like, people are like, is this you? I'm like, there's part of me in a lot of these people. And is this your mom? Is the mom your mom? I'm like, no, that's definitely not my mom. But, you know, there's parts of my mom in it. And I think that was the best way for me to go about it, was to scatter them around. And, you know, there are books that are just like metafiction stuff that I'm always fascinated with, that can kind of get away with it. But for me personally, I just wanted to make sure that it was me playing around with all these people and things that I knew, and trying to figure out how to turn it into a story.
Thank you.
So I primarily write fiction, and so I haven't quite had to think about this in the context of nonfiction, and I'm not terribly interested in writing nonfiction, at least not at the moment. But I found that the baseline for me in terms of thinking about these questions has to sort of gets tossed aside, because I have to think first and foremost about the story and the characters within the story. And my job as author is to be loyal first and foremost to the story and making the choices that are most important for the story. And inevitably, that's going to mean that characters may or may not resemble people in my life or people in my family, but they have to be full on the page, and I cannot replicate another person's fullness in that way because I'm not that person. And so I feel very comfortable with that and with that boundary. It has been interesting because certainly some of the characters in my novel greatly resemble some people in my family in very sort of basic biographical ways, though they are not, largely in character and in behaviors. And so, you know, I don't know how many of my family members have read my novel. They're not really big readers. So they're very smart, but they just like, I don't know, like a lot of people don't read these days, and like they fall into that category. So I don't know that they've read it, which I'm very comfortable with. As long as they buy it, which they're doing. I'm trying to have a career, so please buy the book. Please buy our books. Please buy our books. But anyway, but the point is, I haven't had to deal with that directly yet, and I'm hoping that I won't have to. But I do feel comfortable with the fact that the words "a novel" are also printed on the cover.
Yes, I think fiction gives us a lot of shielding. Katie, do you have thoughts about this one?
I mean, I don't think I've written anything that's closely based on anybody in real life. I mean, often for me, the starting point for a novel is a situation of some kind. So it's actually, and then the character follows from the situation. So I don't think I have done that yet, but it's a very, very interesting question, and it's something that comes up a lot. I mean, I teach creative writing, and it's something that comes up a lot in the workshop. The question of, I mean, it's both the kind of question of responsibility, and then it's also almost a creative dilemma: is how do you capture the subjectivity of another person?
Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you. I loved the conversation you guys were talking about as characters change in their family and their dynamic, their relationship to each other changes. A lot of family tales are generational tales. I mean, I recently finished Pachinko, and that covers quite a few generations of time. And so not every family story involves generations, but there are generations that led to that moment of that family. So I was just wondering what thinking about time you guys were having in mind as working on these scenes and these family members, and what time has already passed, or what time in your head do you anticipate these characters going into? It's just the relationship between writing families and writing through generations of time. I was just wondering what your thoughts were.
Family as a way of telling time.
I mean, I can answer quickly, because I think I will never. Actually, I lie, because I just I just outlined something that's multi-generational. I don't think, I'm not a multi-generational writer in general. I mean, I tend to write things with a very, very specific kind of perimeter around the action. But in this novel in particular, I was interested in seeing how certain formal shifts could change your understanding of the narrative. And I think also in terms of that question, I would say that if you look at if you feel that it is a novel about parenting, which on many levels it is, and that is a single generational story, but a lot of people have experienced the novel as being about being parented. And then when your point of identification in the novel is with the child rather than the adult, sorry, not the adult, rather than the parent, then I think you start to introduce that kind of multi-generational quality to it. And so I think, time is one of the great tools that you have as a novelist, and it's one of the things that you can really play with. And that doesn't always mean great swathes of time. Sometimes it can be kind of fracturing time or compressing time or layering time within a single scene even. And that was for me, I did think about time quite a lot in this novel. And so it takes place over a very, very short period of time, but I was trying to get that refractory quality without even doing flashback or flash forward, but rather just thinking about shifts and points of identification. I know that's abstract, but that's all I got to say.
No, I think that's like brilliant. This goes back to Toni Morrison, but first of all, as I said earlier, I'm not a linear writer, and my narratives are never fully linear. I'm always using flashback. I'm using sometimes flash forward. I just like the very first short story I ever published was 3 pages long, and it wasn't linear. My brain doesn't work in that way. I don't experience time that way. And I think it was like in 2012 or 2013, like I had just moved to New York, and I was taking the train to my job, and I was listening to a podcast with Toni Morrison where it was an interview where she was talking about the novel Love, and it had been transcribed onto a podcast. And this was the first time I ever encountered this language about time not working in a linear way, and it like clicked, and I said, oh my God, that's so true. Like that's how I experience the world, so I can't get anywhere on time. And I blame it on that anyway. And so I just think it's such a great tool in fiction, because it can illuminate so many things, and it can give us such great expansiveness into the psyche of characters, into their experiences, into the context that's around them. And I love taking advantage of that and playing around in it. And I think in terms of character and in terms of the relationship between time and character and trying to sometimes render people who inspire us or provoke us in our real lives onto the page, very often I find that fracturing time or breaking it up allows us a window into seeing a character or a real person with different eyes than we normally see them. And I think that's really, really important.
You might remember earlier I said I've done a lot of psychedelics, so this will probably, the way I'm going to say this will probably not sound too much like a person who has not done drugs, but I'm always questioning the idea of time, and obviously we're living in this moment right now, but a big thing that I'm always constantly fascinated with is how moments from the past are always with us, or people from the past are always with us. And that plays deeply into the book. And so the way I structured it, and I mean, this was like, this is my first novel, and I don't know where I got the audacity to even try to do this, but I wanted to do it where it was like one chapter modern day, the next chapter Yitzhak in the early 20th century, the next chapter modern day. And the modern day stuff is like over the span of a few weeks at most. But his grandfather, we see him from the early 20th century into the 1960s. And I did that because I wanted to kind of show just how close, this mother who barely knew her father and her grandson who never even met his grandfather. I wanted to show how close they were and how similar they were in very different ways. And so, it's like it went back to that one question earlier. I think about ancestors I have no idea about, and I'm like, I must have been just like that person or some person that's lingering around, hopefully, because what is time, all that kind of stuff. But it just was like something that I was like very conscious of, and trying to make sure that I like broke down that barrier where time doesn't really matter, because one of the characters is dying, so she doesn't have much time. But I don't want to make that a big part of it. I wanted to make it more about the time they have now and the time they're wrestling with that they don't actually totally understand or have a handle on.
Mm-hmm.
One other quick thing, so sorry. Regarding time and fiction, a novel that was hugely influential to me that I keep forgetting to talk about on this tour, and I spank myself afterwards because I love this book. Not spank, but kick myself.
Sure.
Anyway, is the novel The Wedding by Dorothy West, which is hugely influential to my novel for many reasons, but part of it is that it's very short. I think it's like maybe 200 pages or so, and it goes through 6 generations. It's multi-generational, and the way it uses time is so interesting because it's laid out in a very straightforward way, but it's really, really intricate, and it's far less straightforward in its implications and its affect than how it looks on the page. So that's one to think about in terms of the relationship between family and time, and rendering characters through a large expanse of time.
Can I just add 2 more things that I forgot to say? Because we were talking about books, and then you mentioned Lost Highway, which is a masterpiece. I don't care what anybody says. I had finally watched the 2nd season of Russian Doll right before I started writing the book, and it was the first time I'd ever seen Jewish intergenerational trauma kind of tackled in an interesting way. And at the same time, I finally decided to watch The Watchmen, which I had kind of been sleeping on because the movie was so bad. And it's one of my favorite graphic novels. And that also is a meditation on intergenerational trauma filtered through the superhero lens. And so it's like when you can find little nuggets of inspiration, it comes in the weirdest places. And I think it's just the most beautiful thing, like hearing you guys like mention these different kind of places that you got your ideas from, because now I don't feel so like I was like picking from way too many weird spots. So thank you.
I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much to our host institution here, to Brooklyn Book Fest and the volunteers, and to all of you for coming.
And Alex,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.